So, okay, thank you for attending today's session. And we're going to be exploring the concept of stretching and challenging learning in the context of the education in early years technical qualifications. So, welcome to the session. Thank you. We know how precious time is. So, like I've just said, we are recording today's session. So please, you choose your own camera preferences, off or on. Whatever works for you works for us. We'll be starting our session with the cameras on, but then we'll turn them off when we're up and running so that we're not a distraction. And we'll be using breakout room activities today. So be aware that we'll be going into rooms and having a chat about today's subject. But the breakout rooms won't be recorded, so we'll be summarising the breakout room activities and discussions once they've taken place. So just to keep that in your mind. So we'll do some quick introductions first. So my name's Helen Scanlon. I'm part of the provider development team. Our purpose is to support the teaching and learning of the technical qualifications. So I've been working with teachers in the education and early years at T level since 2020, and I'm from a technical teaching background myself, so I know your pain, I know your struggles. Purpose of this recording is to provide information and guidance to help you to prepare for the teaching and learning of the qualification across the scale of stretching and challenging learning and the learning opportunities. I'm going to hand over to Gemma now to say hello.
Hi everybody, I'm Gemma. I'm the newest member of the provider development team, soon to be taking over the large portion of the workload for the education and early years T level. My background is in initial teacher education with an original specialism in community ed, teaching maths, English, so functional skills or basic skills back as it was in the day. So I'll be supporting Helen this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all properly.
Lovely, thank you, Gemma. So first thing we're going to do today, is share the outcomes, which you can see on the screen now. We're going to evaluate opportunities to differentiate learning, exploring the elements included in the core of the technical qualification, but also share ideas for stretching and learning for students at varying levels. And we will include a question and answer session at the end. So many thanks for attending and many thanks for watching the recording if you're doing so. But before we get started, we're going to ask you to rate your starting confidence levels in terms of being able to differentiate or stretch and challenge the learning of the education early years technical qual. So I'm going to do this via a poll. It's on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low and 10 being high. What is your starting confidence level in terms of stretching and challenging learning in the technical qualification? So I'm going to launch the poll. If you have any problems with the poll, because we know some firewalls stop some providers from able to access it, please put your number into the chat instead. But Gemma, can you see the poll now? Is it showing?
I can indeed, yep.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to view the results as they come in. So thank you, people are starting to respond to it. Just choose your number between 1 being low and 10 being high. Where do you feel in terms of stretching and challenging learning in the technical qualification for education in early years? Wonderful. Putting your answers in. Is anything coming in the chat, or is it everyone just using the...
Everyone appears to be just using the poll. That's great.
Oh, it's working. That's wonderful. It's the wonder of Teams, isn't it? The wonder of Teams. I'll give it another few seconds just to ensure everybody who wants to have a vote does get the chance to. Right, I'm going to close the poll and show you the results. So you should see are the results showing now in the chat or on the screen?
I can see them in the chat.
Brilliant. So everybody's back right in the middle there. So that's great. I mean, something that we do say to education early years practitioners all the time is that education early years hasn't changed just because we've got these new T-level qualifications. So if you're confident in stretching and challenging learning at level 3 already, wonderful. You should take that confidence into the T-level. So brilliant. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to have another quick poll just so that we're on the same page in terms of what we're talking about. So you'll see your options on the screen now. I'm not going to launch the poll just yet. I'm going to ask you to read through these different 5 options in terms of how you define differentiating or stretching and challenging learning within the T-level. I'm going to ask you to choose which definition you feel best describes what you think we mean by differentiation and stretching and challenging learning and the students' experiences. So I'm going to be quiet for a second just to let you read through these options, and then I'm going to launch the poll. And same again, if the poll doesn't work for you and you're not able to choose them, please just pop which number that you feel that means the most to you, best describes you to you. What do you think we mean by stretching and challenging learning? Okay, I'm going to launch that second poll now. And it's exactly the same options, but obviously in that in the poll rather than on the screen. So just choose the one that you feel resonates the most closely to what you feel it is. Is there anything coming in the chat, Gemma, or
yeah,
not?
Everything's there. I can see it.
Brilliant. So we're having any responses just yet. Obviously, people, it's anonymous, so please don't worry about we're looking at which one's right and who's saying what. But which one of those do you feel best describes stretching and challenging learning or differentiating learning in the classroom?
Lovely responses are coming in now. That's fantastic.
Brilliant. Yeah, and just to clarify as well, teaching, learning and assessment, TLA, just in case that's a TLA, a three-letter acronym that you weren't sure about. So brilliant, thank you. I'm going to close the poll now and once again share the results. So everybody's in a very, very similar frame of mind, and that's wonderful. And you'd probably guess that there's no correct one answer there. They're all representative of the process. It's just useful to consider our own interpretation of the term and definition of the topic. And I think maybe amalgamate all of these definitions to have a clear understanding of what we're going to look at in detail during today's session. So brilliant, thank you. Okay, no more polls for the moment. You'll be pleased to hear we're not doing any more polls for now. We're going to do a little bit of input. So before I move on, we're gonna look at a few more detailed quotes, and these are obviously from academics. I just want you to read through those, and I'll just be quiet for a second. So the first definition here kind of focuses on stretch and challenge activities, but focusing on the more gifted students to display abilities at the highest level. And I think in my experience, well, normally when we think about stretching and challenging learning, we do think about stretching those higher level or more gifted students. The second one here suggests that stretch and challenge activities should allow for all students to meet higher level learning outcomes. And obviously those different learning outcomes are going to be at different levels. And then the final example on this slide applies the term to all students, but brings in the expectations of the teacher. And I find this most interesting. Do we set expectations and therefore teaching and learning activities based on the limit that we as the teachers set? Just something for you to think about. Like to pause and think about your approaches to stretching and challenging learning. Do you consider all your students and to what level you can stretch them to? Or do you apply it to your higher performance students only? And we will explore this using the content of the Education in Early Years qualification. Gemma, I'm just going to pause here a second to see if there's anything that you wanted to add or that I've missed on that bit.
No, I don't think there's anything I want to add, just to say that there is a slide further on today where there might be some interesting reading material, particularly related to that third definition that Helen's just given there, all about that expectation, or whether or not we influence potentially our students' attainment and achievement based on our expectations of them. So there'll be a bit more on that, which I also find really interesting.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gemma. And just a reminder to everybody, pop them some questions or pop things in the chat as they come to you as we talk through. If anything resonates, as I say, with you, or if you have any questions about anything that we say, please pop them into the chat and Gemma's going to watch that for us.
Definitely. We've just had a really interesting comment from Sue. Thanks, Sue, about Vygotsky's scaffolding for adults theory. That's definitely something to talk about in the breakout room later on.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Sue. Right, we're going to start today with a discussion about comfort zones. We all have them, and when learning something new, they can be a huge barrier. Think about when we learn anything new. It is scary. Think about something you've learned and had to push yourself out of your safe space and into that uncertain landscape of limited knowledge or even no knowledge. I think straight away of my first driving lesson, or in a work context, the first time I cut someone's hair or did my first bikini wax. Really scary situations, no matter how well supported I was. So, the image on the screen now provides a visual representation of how we move from our comfort zone into fear, and then into learning, and then hopefully the growth zones. But how do we get students to leave their comfort zone to get to where we need them to be? It's got to be on an individual basis. What works for one student won't necessarily work for others. They'll need to be supported to move into and through the fear zone. The classroom needs to be, or the placement needs to be, a safe space to move from that comfort into the fear and through into learning. And then being supporting in the learning zone, hopefully that will help them into what we would call self-actualization and having an awareness of what they've learned, how they might use it, and aware of its worth, application, but of course further areas for growth and development. So what we're going to ask you to do very briefly here is to stop and consider the journey that our students take. That horizontal line arrow in that image is the perfect world scenario. Do students make this straightforward journey, or do they regress and move backwards and forwards through this process? I'm going back to my driving lesson. When I made mistakes, I definitely regressed, and I needed some support and guidance from my driving teacher to leave that fear zone and get back into the learning zone. And then finally, the circles on this image seem to be quite similar. Maybe they have different widths depending on the student, the topic being learned, or is it dependent on prior knowledge of the topic or prior knowledge of that learning situation? What factors do you think impact on this for your T-level students? Can you visualize what I've been talking about in terms of your students and their T-level teaching and learning? So please put your thoughts and ideas into the chat to share your experiences and make links to your current teaching and students, please, to make some sense of it. Some students can very quickly move from the comfort zone back into the learning zone if they're feeling quite confident. But some students are going to need that support and guidance to get through that fear. And sometimes the fear will be there in a greater or lesser extent, or to a greater or lesser extent, depending on what the subject is and where they are in their personal learning journey. I was talking to a curriculum manager recently in large FE college, and he was talking about differentiation and individualisation and how they go hand in hand in relation to what we ask students to do and how we get them to do it. Gemma, I'm going to pause a second to see if anything's come into the chat before I move on.
Yes, definitely. We've had a couple of comments actually. Oh, great. It's just gone ping, ping, ping. Great. So Laura says she thinks it links into the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Which indeed, that term self-actualization, we've probably all seen that before at the top of that pyramid. Because of the amount of content to cover, I think most students sit in the fear zone with new topics, Teresa. Yes, of course, if it's new content, a new format, then I think the majority of students do need some level of support to move through that fear zone. I totally agree. And Stu, again, the arrow would realistically become a zigzag. Yes, yes, indeed. I don't think there are the odd students, as Helen's just said, that do make that transition through those zones sort of fairly smoothly. But I think I would safely say I'd be on a zigzag, definitely.
Yeah.
Laura, again, if they don't feel safe and supported in the classroom, they won't have the confidence to move from the comfort zone. We need to create supportive classrooms where students feel safe to make mistakes in their learning. Definitely, definitely.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. I mean, as an ex-maths teacher, it's really hard to get people from the comfort zone to the learning zone because, you know, in maths, 2 and 2 is never going to be 5. And if they come up with the wrong answer, it's really, really scary. So that's something we talk about a lot in maths teacher education and in supporting the student to get it, to even have a go at the question, never mind actually answer it in front of their peers. But we'll talk about that more in our next slide. Is there anything else come into the chat or shall we move on?
Yes, one more comment from Sally, who says we could link this first to starting their first industry placement. Definitely, particularly as these are quite sort of young adults going into their first placement. You all remember that feeling, don't you, when you walk for the first time into that staff room and everybody's there. There is an element of it being new and you may feel fearful. And T-levels, I think, and I'm sure everyone will agree, they do have that element, don't they? That lovely element of making these learners, these students, ready for employment, but definitely link that to industry placement.
Absolutely. Lovely. Thank you for that, Sally. Okay, so moving on to evaluating our use of stretch and challenge activities. Let's start with a well-used differentiation technique, and that's asking questions. So please put into the chat what you think we mean by the 5 W's and 1 H. So we're going to pause for a second and say, the hint is this is about asking questions, but what does that mean to you? What are the 5 W's and 1 H that you think we're going to talk through? And if you can just think of some of the W's and what the H might be, please pop them into the chat and we'll just pause for a second. And if you're watching this as a recording, please pause it again before we give you the answer and do the same. What do you think we mean by the 5 W's and 1 H? Anything come into the chat yet, Gemma?
Not yet. Oh, there we go. We've got Laura straight on the case. What, why, where, when, who, and how.
Lovely. If everybody else is still typing, yes, we'll talk through the answers. Thank you for that. Okay. So yes, what, where, I mean, and in any order, sorry, what, where, who, when, why, how. So as identified, the starting words for a range of different questions, but how do they relate to stretch and challenge? If we asked a question using them, would they all give us the same depth and breadth of answer? Thinking about different action verbs, would they all meet the same types? Do they all identify and describe? And do some of them start to carry out evaluation? Very slight variations can make very big differences. So we'd encourage you to plan a range of questions with this in mind. You might ask some students what and when, and some other students why and how. They're going to provide very different thoughts and answers. But also never forget the power of the word might. When supporting students to leave their comfort zone, step into that fear zone and into the learning zone, what might be the answer or why might that happen makes formulating an answer for students venturing into new theories or concepts much easier, using an approach which makes it safer to get the answer wrong. And it should allow for a more comfortable experience, remembering that the classroom environment is that safe space to make mistakes and learn from them, rather than being too scared to get involved. And anything else that pops into your mind that you'd like to share, please pop into the chat. And I'm just going to pause again. Is there anything else come into the chat as we've talked about these W's and H?
Not just yet, other than Sally giving us our who, what, why, when, where, and how.
Yeah, brilliant. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Thanks ever so much. So please use that chat to put in anything that you think about as we're talking. Okay, so time for us to look more closely at the core content of the TQ and explore the opportunities to differentiate and individualise learning activities. I'm going to try and demonstrate the approach we'd like you to take or you to use in the breakout room activity, which is coming after this slide. So what are we wanting to do? So the example I'm going to use comes from the NCFE resources for the technical qualification in early years. And for this example, we'll look at element 9, which is obviously reflective practice. This on the screen now is a snapshot from the scheme of work and starts off with a tutor-led discussion around reflection. So using prompt questions to introduce the topic, which gives us the first stretch and challenge activity. Would we ask all students the same question, or would we plan more challenging questions for the higher achievers and more structured or supportive questions for less able or less comfortable or confident? Using questions can be a really effective differentiation technique, and we can plan them in advance, but also be responsive during a lesson depending on how quickly the topic's been understood, but also how fast the students are moving out of their comfort zone. We can also adapt our questions in real time to stop progression and move students back into the learning or growth zone. With questions, the possibilities are just endless. So moving on to the next activity on here, where students reflect on their own career timeline and learning journey. When I read that, I thought, well, with limited career experience, how easy will this be for them all to do? What might we need to do to prepare some students to do this? Might they need to be supplied with a sample career timeline to get them out of their comfort zone? Or might some of them need to be so confident that we could ask them to present theirs to the rest of the group? What stretches the learning for one student effectively might terrify another? And so how could this be adapted to meet individual needs? Then the case study task offers many more stretch and challenge opportunities. How much detail is included in the case study can be varied, and the language in it can be varied in terms of technicality or simplicity. We can also alter the instructions given to students to make the task easier or more challenging. For example, changing the questions we ask of them and how we want them to focus their evaluation of the specifics in that case study. We could provide templates which scaffold their work, or we can give them no guidance at all. And all of these strategies can be pre-planned or adjusted in real time, depending on how the students manage and engage with what we've asked them to do. I'm going to pause again just to see if anything's come into the chat, or if there's anything that you would like to add that I've missed there, Gemma.
Nothing in the chat. I think everybody's brains are doing overtime this Friday afternoon, working out how, looking at that and thinking, ooh, I wonder how I could apply that in my own practice. But there's nothing in the chat quite yet.
Right.
So we're probably good for breakout, I think.
Brilliant. Okie dokie. So just keep thinking about those questions, but I'm now going to explain what we're going to do next. So hope you found that useful, helpful. We're now going to do those breakout room activities together and discuss and explore the opportunities there are to stretch and challenge students' learning, using the core content as the basics of our discussions. I'm going to put the link into the to the chat board into the chat shortly, and I'm going to explain, if you haven't used Jamboard before, how it works. Okay, so when you go onto the Jamboard, you'll see a column on the left, which is the control panel. This is a screenshot of the control panel, and it's the arrows pointing to the sticky notes. And what we're going to do is we're going to create sticky notes and put our ideas, onto the Jamboard slides. So that's going to look like that. Then we've got a slide for each of the 12 elements. We've got 12 pages with an extract from the NCFE scheme of work on each slide to use the basis of our chat. But please don't feel restricted to what's there. If you've got other ideas for differentiating teaching, learning and formative assessment activities, please share those too. So I'm going to be facilitating one room group discussion and Gemma will be in the other. Gemma, let's use different colour sticky notes. You can see the colours we've got there. Which colour would you like your breakout room to use out of those colours?
Oh, I'm going to go traditional yellow, I think.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit bright and energetic today, so I think I'm going to suggest we use pink in ours. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to pause the recording now because, like I said, the recording doesn't happen in the breakout rooms. But Gemma and I will summarise together from your breakout room activities what is said. So just bear with me while I pause the recording. Okay. I'm going to leave my camera off for the moment. I'm hopefully share my screen. Gemma, can you tell me if everyone's back and if I'm sharing?
You are indeed sharing, and I think everyone's back. The only one we haven't got back, sadly, is Sue. She's had some problems with her internet connectivity.
Oh, bless.
I know, so she may have to re-watch the recording, unfortunately, but never mind.
Righty-ho. Okay. What I'm going to do then is, if we just if we all just chip in now, then to see what we found. We tried to make sure there was something on every page, but I don't think we quite managed it. But I'll talk through element 1 very quickly. So I talked about looking at school Ofsted ratings, getting the students to look at their areas, but to identify the key points and recommendations and analyse what the regulatory bodies are saying about the different schools and how that would be implemented. But also going on visits, looking at different approaches, having differentiated tasks for the students based on their levels of confidence, experience, knowledge in relation to where they're going and what they're looking at and what they're doing. So I'm going to say Pippa and I can't remember who I was with now. Pippa and Sally, was it? And have I missed anything there?
No.
Okie dokie. For supporting education, I'm going to let who's the song person?
That was me, Sally.
Go on, Sally. Tell everybody about the songs that your colleague does.
Okay, so one of the colleagues that teaches the theory element actually makes songs for the learners. She does a really good one. I can't do it because I haven't learned it. I'll put my hands up. Obviously, if I did, I would do it. Old MacDonald was one of them. And she did a really good one on Bronfenbrenner, where she uses actions. And she does that and she reiterates it over a few weeks. But if I was to go and ask one of the learners what Bronfenbrenner's theory is, they would automatically do the gestures that go with it. So it's a really good way of getting them to remember the theory.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you, Sally. And Pippa, we talked about using theory in the classroom and stopping and asking the students to tell them what you've just done. Okay, we'll move on to element 3. Do you want to talk us through 3, Gemma?
Yes, the chat was great. We had some really good discussion, so we probably haven't put as many post-its as we might have liked. But for element 3, we talked quite a lot actually about real life policy examples. So we talked about the students bringing back policy examples from their placement settings and linking that to legislation. So which legislation informs which policy, why, how it's used, looking at codes of practice, peer working and sharing setting experiences, looking at case studies as well in mixed ability groups. Lola also mentioned some really interesting stuff that she's been doing, looking at documentaries and then transposing those documentaries into role play activities.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so some really good discussion around creation of policies and procedures. So having a go at creating their own with each person in the group getting an assigned role. Fantastic stuff.
Excellent, thank you. We'll quickly dive into behaviour. Lots of really good discussions, and we talked about the different milestones and considering the behaviour expectations between 0 to 19. You know, how does a GCSE student compare to a nursery student? Child. So lots of different discussions about strategies of positive and negative reinforcement, acting out those scenarios, having different ability groups. So we've got peer support and making those strong links to theory and behaviour. So lots of that was the first one we looked at, and it was lots of just really good discussion about how you can use scenarios, case studies in a variety of ways. And it's not just a case of look at it and talk about it. There's so many more things you can do. How about you take us through element 5?
Yeah, so again, we talked about role play with regard to sort of parenting styles. And we also talked about reflective activity, about judgments on parents. Lola raised some really interesting points about how, you know, not to judge a book by its cover and not to look at parenting skills in a negative way and try and draw on your own experience. So reflecting on your own family unit, which helps develop confidence. She raised a really good point about, and sometimes when you talk about your own experiences as the practitioner, it opens up the room and gives people that sort of safe space in which to talk about their own. And sometimes it makes them realise, oh, I'm not the only one that finds this a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Brings it to life as well, doesn't it?
Definitely.
We've got lots for working with others. We talked about joining anything in with element 5. Pippa was saying she puts element 5 and 6 together because working with us, working with parents, kind of very much linked. But everything that's on the sheet there, and just so everybody knows, I can turn these into PDFs and I can share them with you all afterwards. So you'll get all of these sent to you afterwards. So lots of differentiation activities highlighted there, which we could talk about for hours, but we've only got 5 minutes left. So I'll just quickly move on. Child development, we also talked about the link to element 12 when about the impact of disability on motor skills, but also using the secret life of a 4-year-old with differentiated guidance and instructions for what to look for and what to do, and all use of videos and the differences in how you are asking students to respond to it or work with it. Really interesting and useful. Observation and assessment, as you can see, talked a lot about different linking it to EYFS and Dev Matters and using other examples, using, for example, forest schools, and we've got farm-based nurseries in Sally's area. So lots of really good discussion about and social and health care and the health and social care and the safety implications, but we also talked about using our colleagues in other subject areas to make links when we're talking about working with others, if you wanted to bring in you know, a healthcare worker kind of thing. But lots on observation and assessment. We didn't do any more on reflective practice because we thought, oh, you've got this covered. Do you want to talk to us about your discussion on element 9?
Yeah, I think we chose this one because it was one that both the girls in our group kind of had some really good ideas on. So we talked about mixed ability groups again, group PowerPoints of theorists and collaborative working, practical activities. Now this was Laura's a marshmallow and spaghetti activity. We didn't get into too much details, but I have seen it before. Contributing to each other's reflections. So looking at each other's reflections and remembering to reflect on what's gone well, not just what's gone wrong. Yeah. And then assigning roles based on where we believe our own students need to be stretched and challenged. Yeah. So formative assessment informing those roles.
Lovely, thank you. And we did get on to equality and diversity to an extent. We talked about having guest speakers from various backgrounds. I talked about blind teacher trainers that I've had, trainee teachers who have had working with me, and the guys have got visually impaired and hearing impaired elements in their college as well, so that they can get guest speakers from those areas directly. And of course, if you're on a visit, we also talked about how getting someone out of their comfort zone might be to support them to ask a guest speaker or on a visit, asking them a question, and that could be their stretch and challenge activity. It's all very much reliant and based on individual circumstances. So, wonderful discussions. So thanks everybody. We'll move on. That's what we've just been doing, that Jamboard feedback. So as I say, we will send those PDF slides to everybody. We've got a range of other methods that we're not going to talk about. This was kind of a backup in case you didn't talk a lot and you talked loads, but there are so many other activities that you can use, and what we'll do is we'll send you an overview of what we mean by all of these as well. With the slides, we can copy that for you, but there's a range of other things. I think my favorite is playing basketball and netball and not tennis, because you know what it's like when you ask questions in a group or the questions are asked from each other. You can structure it so it's a different type of approach. But yeah, we'll explain what all of those are in our follow-up email. Oh, does anybody have any questions? I mean, I feel like we've had the opportunity to talk lots, but I just wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to talk lots. If you pop them into the chat, or take your camera, take your mic off mute and ask them, feel free to. If there's none, please just tell us there's none and we can move on. But if you've got any questions, now's your chance.
So we've got a chat there. Question from Pippa. Will we be doing the session again? Because she has colleagues that would benefit and will be teaching from September.
Oh, wonderful. What a lovely question. We haven't got plans to, but if you're telling us we need to, we will. We can do this absolutely again. So,
definitely.
Yeah, Gemma, make a note of that. It'll be brilliant.
Indeed.
Yeah, excellent. But we do ask for your input on what we do. So if you have any other ideas or any pinch points or pain points or anything at all, please let us know. We've got that further reading slide for you, which you'll get these slides after the event. So this is what Gemma mentioned earlier. Gemma, do you want to summarise what's on there?
Yeah, really briefly, guys, because I know we're close to time. There's just a few suggested reading things there for you to have a look at. Some have got some really good practical resources in them. So such as 100 ideas for secondary teachers. Does say secondary, but a lot of them are sort of cross curriculum, so you can make use of those. The last one's a video link that will take you back to 1968 if you can bear it. But it's all to do with that thing we discussed earlier on about the teachers' expectations and how the power of positive expectations has an impact on learner achievement. So if you feel inclined, it's all there for you to have a look at.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, we're going to do the ending confidence level scores at the moment now. So now you've attended today's session, we're going to launch the poll again to ask you how you feel now. How do you feel after attending the session? It's going to be exactly the same of that 1 to 10 rating. If you just give me a second, I will launch it. So after attending the session, what's your ending confidence level? You should be able to see the poll now, and then once we've done that, we're going to ask you for some feedback. So yeah, what's your confidence level now at the end? I feel I don't want to guide you, but you should have. The content of the discussions and the ideas you've shared already have been brilliant. So wonderful. We've got people starting to answer. Yes, great. Okay. I think because Lola had to go early, I think everybody's in now.
Yes,
so I'm going to close the poll. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. So you absolutely should have high levels of confidence, definitely. Please do have that confidence that what you're doing is accurate. And then the last thing we're going to ask you to do is some feedback for us. You've got the choice of the link to the form in the chat, or if you have one of those really clever phones or tablets, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen now, just to let us know how you found today's session, what we could do better, and what's your key takeaway. So I'm going to leave that slide on. So you've either got a choice of the QR code or the evaluation form, but we're still here for questions. We're aware that we've got a couple more minutes to go. So very quickly, I'll go on to the final slide. This final slide is our provider development email address. So please feel free to contact us with any questions or contact us directly as part of the provider development team. But also that's the link to our future events. So it's the same page where you would have enrolled or registered for today's session. So just so you know that they are there, but it's a case of a big thank you from both of us. Please, please, please fill in the evaluation form so we know what we're doing right and what we can do better. Rachel, Gemma, I'm going to ask you if you've got any other closing comments that you'd like to make.
No, other than it's been an absolute pleasure. I've been really, really enthused by all of the discussions we had. I think I've really enjoyed this afternoon. So thank you, Helen, for leading it for us. And yeah, same as Helen, just please fill in that evaluation because it really helps us give you what you need and helps us to develop.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I'll just leave that on for the moment. Excellent. Oh, Sally, thank you so much. Said it's been useful in preparation, so that's great. And we are here to help you prepare for the best you can possibly do. But we do need your input. We need to know what you'd like us to do and how you'd like us to do it. So yes, wonderful. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your participation. You've been absolute stars. Have a great weekend. Have a great half term when it gets here, and keep in touch with us. We're here to support and help.